Right now, president and friend of the show from the Vancouver Whitecaps, Bobby Lenarduzzi. Bobby, welcome again.
Thank you, Anthony, and you are still high energy and enthusiastic, and I love it.
I appreciate that, Bobby. Bobby, let's get right into it. 2016 is a big year for your club. You had a solid year last year. Carl Robinson, I'm sure this year has the focus at getting to the final and winning it all. You've added some good pieces. Christian Bolaños, the Costa Rican international today. Great news. The Scarborough boy, Fraser Aird, who we've interviewed a number of times, joining you. Talk about those off-season moves and closing those holes that you needed to close for success this year.
Well, the Fraser Aird, the most recent one, which was released as of today, is a significant one. We do have Jordan Smith, the Costa Rican international, young Costa Rican international, on the roster to battle for that spot now with Fraser Aird. Both are fairly young, and it'll be up to either of those guys to try and secure the spot on a permanent basis. But it should be a good battle, and we've watched the evolution of Fraser Aird from the time he went to Rangers, and he's had relative success there. And for him now, the opportunity to come to Vancouver and demonstrate what he can do, and also by coming here, he's in closer proximity to the national team, and if he does well with us, then I'm sure that will enhance his chances within the World Cup squad as well. Christian Bolaños, it was 2014 where we were actually in negotiations with him for him to come to Vancouver at that time, right after the World Cup, and we were very, very excited about the prospects of getting him in. Unfortunately, he had a very lucrative offer from the Middle East, and understandably he chose to go in that direction. But he's 31 years old, and I think anyone that's watched Costa Rica play will know and will have observed that he's a very integral part of the success that they've had over the last few years. So he gives us a few options. He can play wide. He can also play in the center of midfield as well. So that's something that will provide for us alternatives that perhaps we lacked towards the end of last season. And then Masato Kudo is a Japanese player that we signed that has a pretty good goal scoring record in the J League, and there will be a transition for him, but from what we've seen so far in training, he looks like he's already settling in, and ideally he's good for 10 to 15 goals over the course of the season.
Bobby, what I love is the mix you've got this year. You've got blazing speed with the youngsters in Mene and Coffey. You've got the veteran in Jordan Harvey. You've got experience in the back in your goalkeeper. I think it's a good mix all around. Not too many veterans, not too many young guys. I think it's the proper mix that Coach Robinson likes.
Yeah, I would agree, and we're probably still on the youngest side, but last year we were the youngest team in MLS, and we more than likely will be again this year. But all of those players are now a year older, and ideally that will be reflected in how the team performs this season. And the players like Ousted, who's just turning 30 but has had a lot of experience, you look to those guys, or him in particular, and certainly Pa Maduka, who's come in and probably won't see the playing time that he did last year, but he's an unbelievable guy in the locker room and a great motivator as well. So that leadership will definitely be invaluable again to us this year, and ideally those players that were perhaps struggling with that consistency over the course of a 34-game season and Amway Cup and Champions League, ideally they'll have learned a lot from last year, and they'll be better players as a result.
Bobby, as I mentioned to Chris Kennedy off the top of the show, with all due respect to the Eastern Conference, your conference is deadly. There's not a game you can take off. There's not a week you can take off. I mean, you've got the champs in there with the Portland Timbers, LA Galaxy bringing in star after star from overseas, Seattle, Houston, on and on and on. FC Dallas, who sat on top with some of their youngsters. I mean, this is going to be a real tough start to your season. I looked at your schedule. There's no easy game out of the first 5 out of the gate, Bobby.
I would go beyond the first 5 and say the next 29 as well. There really aren't any easy games, and I know that it's been suggested that the West is a more competitive conference than the East, and probably on the basis of results that was accurate last season. But even the travel to the East and the improvement that we've seen in the Eastern teams, it's going to be even more competitive. That final decision day, where the permutations were endless, was quite something, and I actually think it was a great reflection on the league that the amount of parity that we had resulted in virtually every team, bar a couple, having an opportunity to still make the playoffs. And in our case, we finished in second in our division and secured the bye through the play-in round, but we could have easily finished in 5th or 6th place as well. So I think that's great for all of the markets when you have the opportunity to play significant matches right down to the final game of the season.
Bobby, you mentioned different markets, and I want to ask you this as I asked Chris, where do you see the future of MLS? Do you see expansion on the horizon more and more as we look at maybe, North America really craving and wanting more of MLS? I think of St. Louis, Sacramento, Vegas. I'm also thinking about possibly in Canada. Why not a Calgary or a Winnipeg who can support a franchise? Where do you see the future going with different cities and expansion, and also marquee players? How important is it still to bring over guys like Kaká, Jovinko, and others?
Well, as far as expansion goes, I think the markets that demonstrate their desire to get to the next level, and the first priority for that will be the ownership behind those groups. And when you look at, in particular, a city like San Antonio, who have now been taken over by the San Antonio Spurs, and the San Antonio Spurs have a reputation for being one of the best-run professional clubs in North America, if not the world. So the fact that you can have that kind of potential ownership in MLS, they're already starting to set their stall out for them to be a part of the next round of expansion. Which my expectation is that I do believe that that Beckham will resolve the situation in Miami, and there will be a team there, and that will then be the 24th. And as a result of the level of interest from the markets like St. Louis and San Antonio and Sacramento, the league have now said that they will go from 24 to 28. Haven't established a timeline for that, and I think that's smart, because what you do want to do now, given that virtually every team that has come into the league as an expansion club have done well. They've done well and in particular done well from the point of view of attracting spectators to their games. And Orlando are a fantastic example of that. And you look at Atlanta, apparently they're in the 30+ thousand range of season tickets deposit. So my Cole's Note version of what to expect is, expect expansion to take place when markets demonstrate that they're capable, they have the financial backing, they have the support in the city, and when we find that we have markets like that, I think that there will be an excitement on the part of MLS to get those types of markets in the league to continue to grow the sport.
Bobby, the ugly joke out there for the last number of years is the Vancouver Whitecaps aren't showing enough love to Canadian players, aren't respecting them enough. So let me read the list to you. Giuliano Frano, Canadian, local boy, Ontario boy. Fraser Aird, on board today with the Whitecaps. Scarborough boy, Ontario boy. Russell T-Bird from Niagara Falls, who's been on our show a number of times. Fraze, a guy from Manitoba. Daniel Haber, a North York kid, coming from Israel in the league there with the Whitecaps. How do you want to address those people out there? Some of them, I believe, are really ill-informed when I read this list that say the Whitecaps aren't giving respect and enough time to the Canadian player.
Well, that's as of recent. My response to that has always been, show me a Canadian player that's older, that is unattached, and is capable of playing in the MLS, and we'll sign them right away. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of those out there. And our approach has always been, from the time even prior to getting into MLS, is if that's the case, then let's develop that next batch of players that will ideally play in our team and will go on to play for the national team. And I think Sam Adekubi, Marco Bustos, Kian Froze, those are examples of we've been investing a significant amount of money in player development. And ideally, we'll start to see the fruits of that labor as those players evolve and force their way into our first team. So I've always suggested that, and to your point, people are either ill-informed or just want to believe that as a result of not signing experienced Canadian players to play in our team right away, of which there are very few, and if anyone would like to debate that with me, I'd be happy to debate it with them. So we've chosen to go the route of developing these Canadian players, and my hope is that it will be there for everyone to see when these players break into our first team squad.
And there's one young Canadian kid I forgot that has also joined us on our show from the province of Alberta. I believe he's going to be the next Tino Lettieri, and that's Marco Carducci. Talk about this youngster a little bit too, Bobby.
Oh, no, and I tell you what, the kid has ability, but what he also has, he's such a mature young man. And his situation is an interesting one because he's on the fringe. What he hasn't had a lot of is games. And so, we're assessing right now what we do with him in terms of him getting those games and getting that competition that will allow for him to take his game to the next level. But we believe that he's ideally a keeper of the future for us.
Bobby, just before we let you go, a couple other quick points and then we'll let you go. We really appreciate your time. Canada versus Mexico in the great city of Vancouver. 30,000 plus, I believe, already sold. First and foremost, I want to thank all the people in Vancouver, all the people in the province of British Columbia for getting out, for buying these tickets, supporting Canada, because the last game there against Honduras gave me goosebumps watching with my sons. So congratulations to all the people in Vancouver for doing that. You and I in the past, not so much myself recently, have been outspoken about the CSA. Things have happened in the past. I believe personally, I think they're going on the right track. You've been outspoken. Where do you think they are now today, and how do you feel what they have done in the last couple of years? Women's World Cup, Benito Floro, big game in Mexico. Are you satisfied? Do you want to see more? Are you content with the steps that Victor Montagliani, the CSA president, has taken?
I'm actually, and to your point, and I will acknowledge that, and Victor and I have spoken about this, even when we weren't necessarily overly excited about the direction of the CSA. I had always maintained a dialogue with Victor at that time, and as hard as we were on Victor and the CSA, I do believe now that we need to applaud their efforts as of the last few years. So it's definitely heading in the right direction, and we're very, very excited about that. You talked about the Canada-Mexico game. I'm of the opinion that game could easily get to the 50,000 mark.
Wow!
And we get there, and so that game, and then what I loved about the Honduras Canada match, when a player like Will Johnson after the game says that's the best atmosphere that he's played of in his international career with Canada, well, that's music to my ears, because I think what the Whitecaps have done as a club in this market is we've made the Whitecaps relevant, but not only have we made the Whitecaps relevant, we've made soccer relevant. And so when that opportunity came along to play that first international match in Vancouver, after I believe it was 11 years, we did ourselves proud. And with this next game that's upcoming against Mexico, if we get, well, as you said, we're already at 30,000. And maybe I'm being optimistic, but the feeling I get is that there's going to be significantly more tickets sold prior to that game kicking off. And if that happens, then at the risk of blowing our own trumpet here, I think that maybe we should be considered the best soccer market in Canada. And that's with all due respect to Montreal and Toronto, because they're both doing a good job. But it seemed like we were never going to get a national team game here again, and part of that was down to the turf. I am of the opinion that players complain too much about the turf, and I'm probably of that opinion because I played on the worst possible turf way back in the old NASL days. But the turf should not be a deterrent. And the other thing that I want to add too is that there was a report that 442 did, I believe, on the top 100 soccer stadiums in the world, and the Whitecaps stadium, BC Place, was one of three MLS stadiums that was on that list. So we're doing something right out here, and it's nice that that's being acknowledged by the CSA and by others around MLS as well.
Well, Vancouver has done the country proud. It has done it proud big time. And if they get close to 50, Bobby, I, as a proud Torontonian, born and raised here, would say, you know what? Toronto, Montreal, take a back seat. It's Vancouver's time to ride this out till we get to the end of qualification, because they deserve it. And so again, congratulations to the people of Vancouver, the province of British Columbia. Well done. Lastly, this, Bobby, I want to talk to you about. You're a former coach of the Vancouver 86ers, Canada's men's national team, and you understand what it means to be a coach. You understand what it means to bring the losses and the wins home to the family life. I want you to talk to some of the young coaches out there, not about tactics, not about techniques, not about taking more and more courses. I want you to talk to them about I repeat, not bringing the wins and losses, not bringing the tournament championships or tournament losses home to their loved ones and taking it out maybe in the wrong way to their son or daughter that they might be coaching. Speak to them, Bobby.
Well, being Italian family is very important to me, and I had wonderful examples of parenting with my mom and dad, and I've tried to adopt, my wife and I have tried to adopt the same approach, and it is easy when things don't go well to take that frustration home with you, and I have to admit that there are times where you go home and you've got the long face on and you're grumpy, and but I'll quickly get snapped out of that by my wife, who will essentially say what you've just said, that you can't afford to waste time that you don't get back again on worrying about what's happened, and certainly you need to separate your family life from your professional life, and I feel like that's something that I've been able to do, and I've been able to do that because I have a wonderfully supportive wife, and now I have two great kids. One that's my daughter is 27 and is an entrepreneur, and my son is actually just going down the same road as my daughter. He's 32, just got married last summer, and so I do believe that the fruits of your labor are your kids, and they are your legacy as well. And I can remember having a conversation with my dad when he was on his deathbed. He was struggling with cancer, and what he said to me then still is something that that motivates me on a daily basis. And I had was sitting with him, and obviously I was sad, and he looked over at me and said, "What's up?" And I said, "Well, you're obviously not well." And he said, "Oh, don't worry about that." He said, "I'm 82. If someone had said to me when I was 20 years old that I'd make it to 80, I would have snapped their hands off." And then he said, which is the part that stuck with me the most, "I have had 4 kids, 4 good kids. They've made me proud. They've never caused me any problems, and I leave you guys behind to carry on the legacy." And he's absolutely right. Everything else that you do does pale in comparison to what you have at home. And I was fortunate to have a very good role model, and I've tried to adopt that approach.
You know, that's beautifully said. That gives me goosebumps. That's priceless. That's worth more than any money can buy. Hearing that from your dad on his deathbed, that's going to stay with you for the rest of your life. Bobby, you're a class act. You're a proud Canadian. Good luck in 2016. Good luck to Canada out there against Mexico in Vancouver. We really appreciate you making time again. And as I said, many people out there in Vancouver should be proud and take a bow for buying those tickets for Canada versus Mexico. Bobby, thank you again. Have a lovely weekend, and it's always a pleasure having you on, my friend.
Likewise, Anthony. Thanks very much.
Class act, Bobby Lenarduzzi, proud Canadian, a guy that will go down in history as one of the greats in our sport in Canada.